dreaming and dreams, creativity, and mental health that I published in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And with the word creativity, what I'm saying is that when you remain lucid, the information that's being exchanged between the automatic part of your brain, the old primitive part, and the higher level part that you and I have that make us aware and give us a sense of having a strong self, that by remaining lucid, the exchange that goes on between memories and the functions of the older part of the brain and the newer part of the brain opens up more what I call neuronal workspace in your brain between two levels that normally aren't that lucid, between themselves. So that by opening up that workspace from this conception, you are much more creative, because when you dream, we know that when you dream, particularly in REM dreaming, the brain searches for weak associations. Where in waking, if I have a problem or something that I want to solve, I am using strong associations. I mean, I'm looking at things that seem relevant. I need to get ready for this interview, so I'm going to review my book and make sure that various things are there when I want to access them. But when you dream, it goes off into all kinds of little things. Maybe it's associating getting ready for this interview with when I was a professor or something that I read before. Just weak associations. So there's a whole difference. So what happens with long-term lucidity is that you are accessing in normal waking states weak associations that typically wouldn't be there for the average person in terms of how the brain normally works. So you discover all kinds of things about how your brain operates in sleep, in lucidity, and in waking that gives you insight that you never had before.
Yeah. And that's fascinating about that insight, because I know, and I'm sure everyone listening has had those dreams that are something weird, right? There's something that seems, well, why would I dream about that? Like there was one dream I used to dream a lot, not so much anymore, but it was where I was enrolled in college, but I had never been to class for a day. And it was like the final week, it was the final week of class, and I was supposed to be taking finals, and I was obviously unprepared because I had never went to class, and which is totally the opposite of my personality, because when I was in school, I was very much, studying and making sure I was there all the time, and that. And so I remember having that dream repeatedly and looking that up about what does this mean? And if I remember right, that was something related to stress, or the way I process stress with something going on in my life. But that dream was it felt so, almost silly a lot of times, because I would be in some college setting where, everybody would be looking at me. I think I remember one time, like I didn't have a pair of pants on or something, like just total random things. So when we have dreams like that, it can be easy to just laugh them off or feel like, that they're insignificant. But it sounds like from what you're saying, every single thing that we're dreaming has meaning in some way.
You're addressing, a central message in my book. And that is how emotion gets transferred into dream imagery. And I call this bottom-up imaging, meaning that when you have a feeling of anxiety or happiness, but typically we remember the negative things, the anxiety or the pain, and I call that image transformation. That's image transformation of the brain mind. Emotions get made into concrete things, or I say concretization. They're made concrete into imagery. And once you learn how emotions are made into images, and that can be visual, it can be tactile, touching, it can be sound, and it can be smell or taste as well. But usually it's visual or it's auditory, and sometimes tactile, but not as often. So those get transferred into things that you can see in your dreams, like you're the movie director and script writer. You are both of those,
right?
conversely, and this was a debate that went on more than 20 years ago between Hobson and some other well-known people who were critical of him as a dream researcher. Concepts get turned back into emotions in dreams as well. And so this is a bidirectional process. So I give a fair number of examples of different emotions, different feelings, and the bidirectionality of the imaging and the sensory process that occur in there. But what you are doing is telling me about a very typical dream that we students have. Right. And I still have those when I'm writing a book and I'm anxious about getting done or criticism of it or something. I go into all kinds of university settings. Sometimes I'm a professor, sometimes I'm a student. I can't find my classroom. I can't find
I have that one too.
Notes, yes. And on and on it goes. That's that concrete process of turning emotions into visuals in our dreams. And once you understand that, it opens up a whole world of fascination to observe your own dreams, because you're now understanding what's causing them.
Yes. And I had another very interesting experience with that as it relates to emotions and in our day-to-day life and as it relates to dreams. Probably for, I'm going to say 20 some years, I had a dream about an ex-boyfriend from high school, not somebody in the modern day that I had any, it wasn't something like where I was thinking we were going to get together later in life or something like, it was absolutely nothing like that. It was and I would say this happened 5 to 6 nights a week. I would dream of this person and in some scenario of, and it was almost always like I was trying to follow up after him or like being looked down upon in some way. And I hated talking about this dream because I felt stupid that I was dreaming about somebody from 20 years ago who I had no contact with, didn't care about in this day when I would wake up. But those dreams were so impactful because I would wake up from those feeling, it would affect my day, my emotions. I would wake up sometimes in a bad mood, or I would wake up feeling more anxious or something. And a couple of years ago, I was working with a therapist, and I was talking through some of my feelings about feeling alone. And long story short, she had asked me some questions about what that word alone meant to me and what I had felt in that dream. And what I had realized is that description of alone was how I felt every time in that dream. Like those same emotions came up, and it was this repeating dream of this fear I had of being alone that kept coming up in that dream. And when I was able to realize what that was about and what internally was going on all of those years, it was fascinating to me. First off, fascinating that it took me 20 years to actually get to the point where I could figure out what that was. But it was such that connection that you're talking about with the emotions and then what's actually going on in our dreams. It was such a really, really interesting moment for me to see that about myself.
What's nice about understanding the image transformations is that it saves you a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
I've had dreams within the past month of a old high school friend, and she really wasn't a girlfriend. We had one date, and after we were adults, she was a pianist and developed a particular program that she sold nationally and consulted with. Mm-hmm. And so a couple of times she and I had lunch and just chatted. But within the past month, one of my dreams, I had a romantic relationship with her. Mm-hmm. And you say, well, how silly. And a lot of people, because it affects their conscience, especially if you're married or you're in a relationship, and here in your dream, you're having a romantic encounter with an old friend.
Yes.
And those are just automatic things that happen, and that's natural and normal for all of us. So I discuss some of those, but I also have a new book where I go into a lot more detail on that, because we spend time agonizing over this that's unnecessary.
Yeah, or you feel guilty about it.
About dreams and what it means. And a lot of that is due to the fact that Freud interpreted dreams for most of us. And he's still the most widely read dream interpreter out there. And he's really like reading a lot of other mythology. He gets some things straight that even Aristotle over 2,000 years ago got straight. And a lot of the rest of it, he misses the image transformations altogether. He calls, manifest and content and so on, and it totally misses it. So.
Yeah. And so your book, I mean, you cover all the basis anyone who would want to understand dreaming, would be able to get from this. So you talk about the dream interpretations, about how this affects us emotionally, and even, our day-to-day stress and how that impacts our dreams. I know you also touch in the book about being able to interpret our dreams and the images that we see, help us answer things like, what is consciousness? And even that understanding of how our mind works, where sometimes we feel like there may be another person in there, or, this called other names, soul, ego, whatever a person chooses to call it. But, so you cover those kind of questions that I think people have that are natural when we think about dreams. Do you want to touch on that just a little bit too?
Yeah, we all, because we have secondary consciousness, which means that we're aware that we're aware. We can look in the mirror and we can say that's Glenn or that's Sloan. We recognize ourselves. So when you look at the image transformation between primary and secondary consciousness, and you realize that secondary consciousness is something that humans have that, say, squirrels probably don't have, or mice probably don't have,
right? And
recognize where that comes from. The idea of a self or an ego historically has been called soul, and that's been true across cultures, or it's been translated as soul, because if you go into hundreds of different pre-literate cultures, they still have an idea that there's that little person in the brain that we call ego or self, and they called it soul. So you understand where the idea of soul, or the concept of soul, comes from, or actually where that thing that feels like it is a little person, and technically we call it a homunculus, in the brain, where that comes from. And neuroscience and psychologists and dream researchers have struggled with that, along with philosophers and theologians, for ages. And so all that stuff becomes rather clear and understood. These are natural processes. This is part of becoming human. And we go back and now we can trace it in the third trimester of the fetus, how the fetus is beginning to learn things like its mom's voice, mom's tastes, mom's music, and it has familiarity with all those things by the time it enters the world. So we see the early development of the self coming from that, and how it grows, as we tickle and play with the baby and be part of its life and teach it to be fully human. And it's a marvelous process that we can observe, we can share, we can be part of. But what all of that tells me, and I think it tells each one of us, is that if you feel alone in the world, it is your choice. Because by nature, within your DNA, the way the universe is put together, you and I are made to share our world with each other, and we have brains that accommodate that. Yeah. And so it is a choice to be alone, or it is a choice to be part of Sloan's life and Glenn's life and the friends that we have out there. And that's the marvelous thing, about it. The materialism says that we are just cells and biochemistry and reflective learning. But when we get into dreams and being able to control them in other states of consciousness, we realize that that's not correct. Yeah. Old materialism is a figment of the imagination, because you and I have the capacity, to love each other, to care for each other, to be part of each other's life, to share feelings. And that becomes more understandable and explicit when we make dream life part of our 24 hours a day. Yeah. Yeah. That's so well said. Glenn,
This has been an amazing conversation. Your knowledge of dreams and your experience, and even I love how you know, at the beginning